So you alluded to this as an alternative, and it could almost be said a better alternative to a 1031 exchange. So I guess, can you elaborate on all that? So, what some of the listeners may not understand is start at the basics, like what is generally a 1031 exchange? Most investors know what that is, but let's cover that. Let's cover the limitations within that, because then I think it's a good setup for you to describe what you're talking about.
Yeah, and let's also define the problem like a laser, right? So, high-end primary homes, private businesses, those three don't work for a 1031 exchange. Remember, that represents 2/3 of the total net of the 50% of the total net worth.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that qualifies for a 1031 is investment real estate, and they've made it even stricter now with this recent tax change. There used to be some artwork collectibles, but if you have artwork collectibles, if you have high-end automobiles, if you have a business, if you have a high-end primary home, 1031 is just basically out the door, okay? So, and even so, even if you can do a 1031, the challenge with most of the syndicators that we work with, by the way, we have thousands of professionals across the U.S., including commercial real estate syndicators, operators, brokers, realtors, financial advisors, okay? But one of the biggest challenges for syndicators is oftentimes they're not allowing people to 1031 into their deals. They're just saying, hey, bring us new money. And so the client's paying somewhere between 30 and 50% of capital gains tax and depreciation recapture, depending on what state they live in and how much depreciation they've taken over the years. And then they're coming to them with the money. We're saying, don't do that. Don't come in at 600,000 when you can come in at $1 million, right? And have it all deferred and be able to invest in that. So that's kind of defining the problem. Do you have high-end primary home? Do you have a business you're selling? We've done deals with veterinarians, dentists, trucking companies, tech companies, you name it, thousands of closings. Okay. So that's the problem. All right. So what's the 1031 though for the particular segment for your listeners who are in real estate? What's good about it? Well, first of all, it's a tax deferral strategy. That's great. It's tried and true. We know it. If you can find a deal that makes sense, especially in a buyer's market, or even just relocate to a different market, and you can find a deal where there's forced depreciation opportunity. You can change the countertops, you can change the flooring, you can add washers and dryers, you can change the culture and the curb appeal. That's great. And you can raise the rents. I love that. I do that, by the way. I invest with syndicators and myself, and we own those and we do those deals. But the biggest challenge with the 1031 has to do with the 45-day and the 180 sprint. Okay, and I call this the candle burning at both ends, especially if you're not necessarily going outside of your own marketplace and you go, I can't pass up this offer. I love this offer. I love that I'm getting a 1031 buyer, but then, oh no, I'm on the other side now. Now I have to force and have to go buy something. So that 45 days is to identify, right? 180 days is to close. And oftentimes this candle represents your return. And there's two things burning the candle at both ends. The first one is cap rates are going lower, which means what? Your return is starting to go lower, right? Or prices are going higher. The other one is, although recently rates have dropped back down, but rates were going higher over the last number of years, just slowly inching up. And so if you sell today and 180 days from now, you buy, you're oftentimes selling high and buying a higher 180 days later. And again, that's what happened in the '08 run-up. Before, everyone just kept selling and trading. So that's not good. Our parents taught us to sell high and buy low, not sell high and buy higher. Okay. The second thing has to do with debt. Okay. Debt is not your friend in a highly appreciated, overpriced marketplace. It's actually very, very risky. We call that dumb debt. And this is how people got hammered. Before we go into dumb debt, let's qualify smart debt. Smart debt, I believe, is when you can find a nice deal with value add potential, right? With the ability to raise rents, and maybe it's more of a buyer's market per se, right? That's when you want to take on debt. That's when we want to take on debt, okay? Now, risky debt is in the middle where you add the value to the property, you just increased it by, let's say it's a $10 million deal and you bought it for $6 and you just put $1 million into it, now it's worth 10. Well, risky debt is still staying in that debt and not doing anything, right? Why? Because the market could shift and you can lose some of that. We call dumb debt is selling that deal, maybe going into what's called recourse or cross-collateralized debt, because banks are starting to tighten up a little bit, right? And then you're putting yourself at risk. So not only do you overpay for a property that's perhaps not a value-add deal, and then second, you're taking on more debt because remember, a 1031, you must replace equal or greater value within that short period of time. So oftentimes that means the same or greater debt, but most of the time it's usually greater debt because you're not going to buy the exact same deal. Okay, so that's not good, right? Because if the market shifts, you're in a tough spot. The last thing has to do with depreciation, okay? Then one of the number one, if not the number one reasons to own investment real estate is the depreciation that offsets the income that's coming in, okay? Now, in a 1031 exchange, that depreciation schedule travels to the next deal, which is not good, right? You want a new depreciation schedule. So Jack and Jeff, you buy a $10 million deal for 27 and a half years. It gets fully depreciated. It's multifamily. It's at zero. If you were to sell that same $10 million deal and buy a $20 million deal, you'd only have a new $10 million depreciation. That original 10 is just, it's travel. It's not good. Here's the solution. The Deferred Sales Trust, you can sell that same $10 million deal, move it into the trust, and then by partnering with the trust, it's new money, you can buy that same $20 million deal and get the full $20 million depreciation schedule, of which at that point you can do accelerated depreciation and see a whole other lot of benefits. So I'm going to pause there because I just said a whole lot and you probably have some questions.
You have just listened to another information-packed episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions with Brett Swarts. We hope you enjoyed today's show and found it helpful. Visit capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to access the show notes and to access more resources. Don't forget to leave a review and join us again next time.